Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of On the Flank. I am one of your hosts, John George, alongside Joe Kirkpatrick. Say hello, Joe.
Hey, everybody.
And this is episode 5. When it comes to analysis, we are on the flank. Episode 5 is pretty big, Joe. Do you remember why?
Because we should be, I guess probably after this goes up, onto Spotify
Oh,
now,
yeah.
so that's cool.
And those Spotify users, they're going to love us now because we're going to be on Spotify officially
We're
5
just
episodes in.
exploding onto the platform.
According to Spotify, we're official now. We're officially a podcast because according to them, you need 5 episodes to be considered a podcast, I guess. This past weekend, Thailand Overwatch World Cup, best group stage so far, Joe. Do you agree?
Certainly in that it was the most interesting to watch. Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Oh yeah. As far as production, technical issues go, lots of those. Maybe not the best in all categories, but as far as competition goes, by far the best. Even if you just look at the standings, you can see second place, third place, fourth place, all 3-2. All teams 3-2. I mean, you immediately know you got some good competition right there. And I think even Thailand and Spain were putting up taking maps off of like China and Australia and these teams that were at the top. So it seemed like almost anyone could take those top 2 seeds. So how we've been reviewing these past events and World Cup stages a little bit different. Today, I've decided that I think we should go in on each team individually, all 6 of these teams, and talk about what we liked, what we didn't like with each team, how their performance went. And of course, let's start with the bottom of the standings. The 0-5 team, Spain. We talked about this last week. We expected a little bit with their with their coaching problems and Neptuno not joining them. Joe, overall, after all the catastrophes that happened with this Spain team, they went 0-5. Do you still think they performed better than you thought they would?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, certainly poor team Spain. But yeah, I mean, all of these teams really have, that player, those couple players, that you really have to hand it to them. Um, is it from the kind of the kind of contribution they're making to their teams? So for Spain, I definitely have to lean pretty heavily on Poppy Fresh, playing lots of hit scan over all these series. And I mean, showing what he's worth, I thought.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Poppy Fresh was pretty good. I was surprised. I think Spain got continually worse as the weekend went on, but I was super surprised to watch that Australia Spain game on the first night, and they were putting up a very good fight against Australia, and then once again against Denmark as well. And we both know that those are 2 of the top teams in this group stage. And then as the weekend went on, it sort of seemed like Spain fell apart a little bit more. So honestly, the first day I was pretty impressed with Spain and their performance. Did not expect them to take a map off Australia or Denmark and keep it so close against those teams. But yeah, overall, Spain, if they had Neptuno, things probably would have been a lot better. If they had a coach, things probably would have been a lot better. But
Yeah, I imagine it was, mental fatigue of not having any kind of support that way. That would have been difficult.
yeah, let's. There's not too much more to say about Spain. It was a disappointing weekend. We knew it would be going in. Let's move on to Thailand, a team I predicted to be in the top 2. Host country, of course. They got number 5. They went 1-4. Thailand. Anything you want to talk about with Thai team?
Yeah, Thailand was interesting. I mean, you talking last week, like you said, you predicted a Beetle because it was their home stage, right? South Korea won in Incheon, United States won in LA. But yeah, Thailand's just I had a hard time finding their footing, I think, against some of these other. I don't even know if more confident is the word necessarily, but I don't know, just more cohesive teams We had Mykl on there. Um, he was the only name that you might recognize if you're a follower of the Overwatch League. But yeah, I don't know. They were there. They did some good work.
Yeah, Thailand, I think just very inconsistent. They took China to 5 maps at one point. They were taking
Yeah,
that
that's
honestly.
probably the biggest contribution they had. Almost a reverse sweep.
Yeah, and just at points in all of these matches, like even the first match versus Denmark, they took the last map and they looked like a completely different team on the last map, and it's just like, okay. And besides Mickey, of course, we all know Mickey Patapan, I believe that's how you say his name, was amazing. That guy was super good. He's their DPS. Tracer was he played Tracer very often. I think he has some insane talent, and everyone talks about Overwatch World Cup. One of the best parts about it is we discover this talent that we otherwise would not see, like on a grander stage. I think Patapan could be one of those future Overwatch League players that we see, much like Mickey was discovered at the World Cup and much like EQO was discovered at the World Cup. Patapan could be that next player, in all honesty. Thailand, if they were in a different group stage, honestly, I think Thailand could have placed third or fourth in these other group stages. They looked very good, but they had some tough competition out there.
I've seen that sentiment other places on the internet as well. Yeah, I mean, going into group stage. Well, about Brazil particularly. Actually, now that I think about it, that if Brazil had played in this stage, they also would have done um, really well. Yeah, it's just uh, it depends on some of these groupings, kind of.
Yeah, like who know? We'll see how China and Australia obviously compared to U.S., Canada, and all these other teams. But this group was so competitive because there wasn't really a team filled with Overwatch League players. So a lot of while it was more competitive and it was a lot fun to watch, a lot of people are assuming like that these teams are just not as good as Korea, Canada, all these other teams we've seen so far, making qualifying. So we'll see how Australia and China face off. But to get back into the teams, Sweden, they got fourth. I think me and you both picked Sweden to move on.
I think so. Yeah.
They did go 3-2, so they did have the same record as Denmark and Australia, but they did get fourth off map differential. They were +1 on maps. Um, who who were their two losses to were Australia and
And
China.
China. Yeah.
But yeah, how did you like Sweden's performance this weekend? I mean, obviously disappointing they didn't make it to top two, but what'd you think of them overall?
Yeah, Sweden was a really, really unique case. Obviously, we talked about one of those teams, basically full of Overwatch League talent, and lots of the individual players, we know have been proven to be really good. Um, Particularly sharp, doing excellent things. Reinforce obviously got a storied history. Chips from Dallas Fuel, a bunch of former Florida Mayhem players. They're all really good individually, but I don't know. I never quite felt like the rest of the team, was able to come together. I think of I couldn't tell you what match it was. Might have been versus Australia on Temple of Anubis. Um, that this Sweden had a defense. Um, with a Doomfist swap, seemingly out of nowhere that got absolutely nothing done. Um, uh, that's one that comes to my mind. But just in general, yeah, I felt like there was just a little bit something missing to try to unify the team, um, despite all these big individual names.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's. I mean, obviously, Florida Mayhem did not perform well in the Overwatch League season at all. And Sweden performed very well in last year's Overwatch World Cup, but it seems like they've fallen from grace ever since, as far as the Swedish players go in general, because Florida Mayhem had a terrible Overwatch League season. Reinforce sort of stopped. He wasn't on the team last year, but he sort of quit overall. This is his first time playing in a very long time, and overall, Reinforce did look a little shaky at times, and he did look a little rusty at times. And overall, Sweden, I I did expect them to make top two. Both of us know that. But I didn't expect them to be as good as they were last year. And the biggest loss was against Australia 4-0. I mean, as far as obviously this came down to map differential, and losing 4-0 to Australia made a huge difference in Australia making it, and Sweden not making it at the same time. That was just a big one. Overall, Sweden. I mean, I don't know how many positive things you can say about Sweden, because they're kind of like it's kind of they're that roster filled with like old timer, like worn out players at this point. It's like you just got to start refilling. Of course, they got Luddy and Sharp, who are a lot younger players, but it seems like everyone on that team, like Manitin and Chips, are Manitin's not on Mayhem anymore. Chips is not on the Fuel roster anymore, and Reinforce is coming back in. They just felt like it feels like you gotta just find new players if you're Sweden at this point. It felt like that. Anything else to say about Sweden?
Yeah, they came in, they had something to prove, and then just didn't.
Agreed. And even like Tavik was at one point just like a shining star in Overwatch, and he's still a good DPS player, but I think he's sort of fallen from the top ranks, especially with a bunch of new amazing DPS players coming in. So, yeah, overall, Sweden, just they didn't look as good as I thought they would. We move on to Denmark, a team that looked a lot better than I thought they would. Denmark, third place, 3-2. They were so close, and it all came down because they beat Australia. Their only loss was to China at this point of the weekend on the last day. All they needed to do was beat Sweden, and they would move on. They would go 4-1, and they would move on. But Sweden, with a huge 5-map win, 3-2 against Denmark. I mean, it came down to a final map. If Denmark would have taken that final map, they would have moved on, because Australia ended up losing to China in the next game. Came down to one map. What do you think about this Denmark team overall?
I just want first of all, I want to continue what you were saying there, because yeah, once Denmark lost to Sweden there on day three, the immediately match afterward was China versus Australia. And if China had won that 4-0, then Denmark actually would have taken that second place spot, moved on into BlizzCon. So their fate was out of their hands, as they talk about it. But China ended up winning 3-2, so that wasn't the case. Yeah, back to as far as this Denmark team goes, it's probably the one that I knew the least about. I guess going into it, lots of these names I assume are familiar from European contenders. I don't particularly watch European contenders, but yeah, it was good, fascinating to watch them, make that mark in the group. Yeah, and they were, one map away here, one map away there, from taking it all the way to BlizzCon.
Yeah, I was super. I seen Calyx on the team, and people were talking about Denmark as sort of a dark horse. That was like the term of the weekend, dark horse. But,
They were all dark horses.
at an entire group stage of dark horses, and I'm sure China and Australia will now be the dark horses of the top eight. But overall, the Denmark team, I didn't expect them to make top two. They didn't, but they were so close, and they went into day three like it was in their hands. They controlled their destiny, and unfortunately, they just couldn't get it done. They were so close. But overall, if you're Denmark, you performed pretty well. You placed over Sweden, and I think you're happy at the end of the day if you're Denmark, because between Denmark, Sweden, and Australia, these three teams were super even, and it shows in the standings. Um, but yeah, this contenders talent. I hope people look at these people more. Shax, Fisher, both pretty good. I believe Fisher's on Houston Outlaws contenders team, maybe
Uh, it was like Optic Academy or something.
GGEA.
Or
Yeah,
yeah,
GGEA. He is on their team. And these two players, they looked pretty good. Overall, Denmark exceeded my expectations. I believe exceeded yours as well, but unfortunately, just could not make it. Let's move on to Australia, the team I was rooting for all weekend, the Aussies. Mainly because they started off the weekend on a strong note, all wearing kangaroo costumes to reveal their jerseys, and I loved that right away. I was all in on the Aussies because um, I'm also a huge fan of Costa and his leadership. What'd you think of the Aussies this weekend?
yeah, they were great. Like I said last week, they were my other pick to make it out of the Thailand group stage. So I was one for two, I guess.
Yeah,
But yeah, putting in really strong showings. Lots of 4-0 wins. They 4-0 Sweden. They 4-0 Thailand. Um, uh, and yeah, the individual talent. Then that's the other thing I would really want to talk about. CKM playing lots of Pharah. It was great. I loved watching it. Trill playing lots of Winston. It was great. I loved watching it. It's those types of players that you really want to see go on and get picked up by some of these teams.
oh,
J just for the sake of their play. A Kraken on off support played lots of Ana. It was just good Overwatch.
yeah. And it was awesome seeing CKM play Farah so often. She's probably like the most counterable hero in the game. When someone pulls out Farah, you can just easily.
Perhaps perhaps except for Tracer. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now that you got Brigitte in the game, but
But yeah.
Farah at CKM so confident in that Farah, and I love when a team is just so confident in a like off meta pick. Honestly, um, and they just keep bringing it out.
Off meta, but at the same time, like significantly on, depending on the team they're playing against. Lots of these situations, Australia playing against a team that really favors the 3-3 goats kind of comp. Obviously, there's lots of variations we saw played this week. But yeah, running the far end of that is great. They were able to take advantage of that really frequently, which was good.
Yeah, of course, goats comp can't really counter Farah too well. Because their whole strategy is staying on the ground and yeah, being tanky. So yeah, overall Australia, I think they came in confident with their strategy, and obviously their biggest win was the 4-0 against Sweden. That was huge for the map differential. They were so close against China, and they lost to Denmark as well. But overall, Australia, they're moving on mainly because that map differential in that game against Sweden, and just sticking it close with China. Speaking of China, they went 5-0, and they really exceeded expectations, and they showed us who we've been trash talking Chinese talent the past 3 weeks, and they said on the flank is wrong. You guys are completely wrong. We're amazing.
I don't even know if we were trash talking necessarily, but they definitely had to come in, and prove themselves. I think you even pointed out to me in an earlier conversation, the Chinese World Cup team last year also did pretty well, but hardly any of their players were signed to Overwatch League teams. Instead we got Shanghai Dragons, but I think the way I left it last week was, China. Hopefully, China does good. They need to prove themselves here going into a season two that's going to have. Is it just three Chinese based teams? This is the way
Oh, it's four.
it's
It's
got to
four,
go. Oh,
right?
it's
Yeah,
three
it's
new
four.
ones. Okay, I wasn't
Three new
sure.
ones. Yeah.
But yeah, so four Chinese teams. This is this is the way it's got to go in order for them, uh, to build some support, right? And I think they definitely accomplished that. Lots of Western support now after this group stage, because again, playing with 7 teams or seven individuals, excuse me, but and all of them are notable. Yeah, that's the other thing. Whether it was Gushui, which there was a big conversation about how to pronounce that. I'm going with Gushui. Playing that main tank, all the way from their support or their DPS trio of Leave and Crystal and Shy. Just I talked about Australia being a fun team to watch. China was also really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, I wrote Gu Shui was great, and as a Chinese minor, I can tell you it should be Gu Shui.
Huh.
Shui,
Well,
yeah,
there you go.
Shui is a Gu Shui is Chinese for sure, so that's how you should pronounce it. But yeah, overall, Gu Shui, I was really impressed by Gu Shui. Overall, super impressed by this Chinese team, and I know the rumors are that not only are the Chinese teams going to pick up Koreans, but all these new teams are mainly looking at Koreans. But I'd be disappointed if someone like maybe Shanghai even just says like just continues their we want Chinese players thing and says, well, these guys are pretty good. Um, I really I would love to see I would still love to see some Chinese talent picked up by 4 Chinese teams. I would hope not all of them are Korean.
Yeah,
But if they trial the Koreans and they're better, then I don't blame them. But we saw some good Chinese players.
definitely. I guess I in this discussion of China, same way I ended this discussion on Fusion University last week, which is just to say, sign them. We need. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to do. We want to see here for season 2.
Yeah, don't and we're seeing some rumors about the Paris team is waiting until Overwatch World Cup next week to see how the French talent is there. I mean, just take the Overwatch World Cup into account for sure. Don't look at Overwatch League and contenders exclusively, because Overwatch World Cup you can find people like EKO and Mykl who are so important to their team, just on these random country teams. And China is certainly not a random country whatsoever. They've been top 8 at the Overwatch World Cup every year. They're good, and they've got the talent to compete with these other countries. So I think it's time to find the true players. Shanghai, look at the. I mean, I still can't believe Shanghai chose like players that weren't at the World Cup, and I chose some terrible players, but. Yeah. Overall, we could briefly touch over maybe even broadcast talent if we want, because we got Brennan Sideshow casting and they were unbelievably hype. Do you agree?
Oh, definitely. It was good if you go back and watch like the ones where they casted Sweden too, because like half of their commentary was just jabs at Reinforce,
Oh
which
yeah.
which was interesting. But yeah, no, this we've been talking about last 3 weeks now, last 3 stages, that this World Cup has been treated sort of, yeah, as a training ground, and just exploratory, both for contenders casting talent, but also people like Jake, also people like Brennan Sideshow. It's been entertaining.
Obviously, can't say it enough, but ZP should have been there from the beginning. Put him in Overwatch League this year, and Brennan Sideshow, they could definitely move from the desk to casting, because they were I really enjoyed their casting, and they just have so much chemistry as roommates and pretty good friends. But I even saw someone like on the subreddit today mention like, because there was a post about Custa like embracing Reinforce after the weekend was done and Reinforce was upset. And someone was saying like Reinforce shouldn't listen to his stupid roommates, and I was like, I know how roommates work, and there's no way Reinforce is actually like sad about his roommates talking trash about him. That's just what roommates do. Um, But also talking about talent, I think Mika Burton. I thought she was really good talent ever since I saw her on NA Contenders, and she was pretty good this weekend too. On the floor, of course. All right, that's oof, oof. We recapped one heck of a weekend. Let's preview the last group stage in Paris, of course. This weekend we've got finally a European spot. The European people are happy. It's probably going to happen in the European time zone as far as broadcasting goes. Everyone's happy. Let's just briefly go over this one because we took such a long time to recap the Bangkok qualifier.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, let's just predict top two teams, and maybe top two teams and one team you think's gonna surprise us.
Well, first of all, just for everybody who maybe doesn't have it in front of them, we're sitting
Yeah.
at looking at 6 teams again. It's going to be the UK, Poland, Italy, Germany, France, and the Netherlands
Oh yeah.
are your 6 teams in the Paris group stage. Of those two, definitely, or of those six, definitely the two I'm going for, pretty much without question, are France and the UK. I mean, and again, this partly just because this has been a good measure in the past. France probably I think is the team that has the largest amount of Overwatch League talent. But not only that, it's significant Overwatch League talent. We got I don't know exactly who their starters are. It's not indicated here. But Poco's playing on the French team, as is Soon and Unko, and AKM. Lots of big names, lots of good synergies, I thought too. That I'm definitely going for France there. And then the UK again also happens to feature another Philadelphia Fusion team member in Boombox, Amazing Xenia, as we know, but also several players from the core of British Hurricane, which obviously the London Spitfire Academy team. We got Cruz and Fusion's Astro, who I think is Funny Astro, maybe. I don't know if they play on the team anymore, but they used to play together as British Hurricane. So I really want to see them too, again, stepping out of contenders into this sort of larger stage, to see what happens, how they can, start to prove themselves.
Yeah. So, I mean, exclusive this qualifier exclusively like European teams, but I totally agree with you. France and UK, top two by far. I believe we're reverting back to the first two World Cup qualifiers here, and that I think it's pretty obvious the top two teams here. I'm not sure if we're gonna get any surprises of any sorts really. Italy's like made up of like not even contenders teams, but open division players, and overall these other players on Netherlands, Poland, Italy, Germany, very just not too many well-known players on those teams. As the United Kingdom and France, obviously France was top four last year in the Overwatch World Cup, and I think they are overall favored to get first in this qualifier. And then the UK also made top 8 last year, and I think they'll be second probably. And I don't know if anyone's going to surprise us really with the other 4 teams. But who do you think is going to win? United Kingdom, France. That's the big game. A lot like the US qualifier, they have that as the last game of the entire weekend. Who do you think is going to win it?
Of course they would do that. They gotta play the field as it goes. But yeah, in that head-to-head, yeah, I would probably also give the edge to France. Although, it's I feel like I just keep saying this over and over about the World Cup, but it's just gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah.
See how exactly it goes down. Outside of the structure of the Overwatch League that we've gotten used to here in the last year. Just see who can throw down.
Yeah. I'm going to go France as well. I'm excited to see Wins. Wins was a part of the Rogue roster before Overwatch League started, and we have not seen him since. This is his first time. He's a lot like Reinforced. He's first time playing since the last Overwatch World Cup. And fun fact about Wins, he is AKM's older brother. So some brotherly love. Um, I do think France is better than UK though. They've got more Overwatch League talent and better Overwatch League talent for sure. AKM and Soon are amazing players, and Unko. Um, and I miss Nico as well. He was very good in the Overwatch World Cup last year, and he ended up never getting an Overwatch League spot, which surprised me. But Nico's a great player. Let's move on. Let's move on to the news. We've got not as much concrete news this week as we did rumors. But we'll start with the concrete news, and then we'll possibly get into some rumors from, of course, Mykl. Zephyr. He's heading on over to Florida, to the Florida Mayhem. Soul Dynasty, of course, was Zephyr's old home. Sent on over to the Florida Mayhem, and Soul's dealing a couple of their players out. They also gave Kuki to the Los Angeles Valiant. So let's just talk about Soul, departure of these two players. What do you think? Big impact at all? Expected it? Give me your thoughts.
Well, big impact, certainly no. Uh,
Yeah.
they're down to Seoul is down actually to six current active players, including Fissure. Obviously, got for the Gladiators nowhere Fleta Munchkin, Toby, Zunba, and Ryu Jahong. Which actually, now that I'm looking at that, is not a bad roster at all.
No.
Um, so yeah, obviously that's their only six. So presumably they'll be doing some additions to that. But yeah, no, I like I like being able to cut the fat like that. That's good. Presumably got him some money too from those two teams. So yeah, good decision, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree, and it was good for all these teams involved. Obviously, Florida Mayhem, a pretty desolate roster right now. So getting Zephyr, getting any player is good, but getting Zephyr for a Soul Dynasty player, that's pretty good for Florida Mayhem, who had a pretty abysmal season one. And LA Valiant loves to pick up the scraps of the Soul Dynasty, so Kuki, they'll take Kuki as well. Um, Especially with Valiant dropped a lot of people from their bench as well. So rebuilding over there at the Valiant. Um, as far as new teams go, we've got, I mean, right now we're in the signing period for the expansion teams, the 8 new expansion teams. So most of our news is going to come from those teams. The first piece, at first maybe an only piece of concrete news as far as player signings and coach signings go, is with the Overwatch DC team getting some former NYXL, and that you love to hear former NYXL if you're from Washington DC. Janice and Wizard Hyung, of course, the coach, both coming to DC. What do you think about this as starting pieces for a new roster?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It's a start, but it's certainly a good start. We've seen, both what Janice is able to do mechanically as well as what Wizard is able to do, with this organization. I mean, and that's about all we can say right now. But it's looking positive.
Yeah. And as far as other players go, the GM, I can't remember her name right now, but the GM, she tweeted that she's going to go for a mixed roster. This isn't going to be just Koreans, and both Wizard and Janice can speak English. So, yeah, this isn't the beginning of a full Korean roster, but more of a mixed roster. So we'll see who else they signed, but I definitely think it's always good to start with two players that are on a team that knows how to succeed. And we got some more leaks. This one's from Real Leak Boy, who I guess is now a good source. Possibly. But he talks about a replay system, which is something everyone has always talked about in Overwatch. They've replay system would be fantastic for not only the teams to have, but for the general public to have. Of course, this tweet mentions is what this tweet mentions is they're unsure if it's going to be just for teams or if everybody is going to be able to replay all their Overwatch games in game. But either way, this is huge for Season 2 OWL teams. They don't have to go through VODs. They can actually go in-game, see the perspectives of each character in-game through replay, do slow motion, anything they want. This is going to be huge for strategies and everything. Joe, do you want this out to the general public, though?
Oh, do I want it for the general public? Well,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. I mean, and ideally, who knows if we get there, but ideally we can get replays of Overwatch League games to the general public, or other pro level games. People, first season always complaining about, oh, we didn't watch enough of this, or we watched too much of this. Particularly supports versus DPS from the observers, but to have the ability to take, Overwatch League Season 2 Stage 3 finals, and specifically watch the positioning and cooldown management of, somebody on Ana, for example, during a championship series would just be fascinating to watch. And like you said, really has the potential to help people get better.
Oh yeah. And it would also be huge to the media and people like us who like to analyze Overwatch. It would give us more information and the general public more information on how to be good at the game and just overall strategies and stuff like that. See every. I mean, there's a lot going on an Overwatch battlefield during one single fight. So just being
Yeah.
able to see every aspect would be amazing for the general public, and it would be probably one step closer to having an in-game spectator system for Overwatch League games as well, which is of course what everybody wants.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't imagine how large that file would be. I imagine it's relatively big, right?
Probably. So the significant, I think CS:GO, Valve games do it. CS:GO and Dota. You can watch esports games in game and in client. Specifically with Dota, you can actually do virtual reality spectating, and CS:GO actually. You can do virtual reality spectating and like actually be in the shoes of your favorite player, which is kind of weird, but interesting at the same time. Yeah, so hopefully that's one of Real Leak Boy's real leaks because that would be amazing. Um,
Sure enough.
Patch notes. A patch came out since our last episode. The biggest part of this patch was Busan new map. Of course, control map. We talked about it a little bit before. We're both excited for it. It's not competitive yet. That'll take about 2 weeks. But as far as hero updates go, we also talked about the PTR pretty much. They pretty much moved everything from the PTR onto this patch. Anything new you want to highlight though?
Yeah, a couple small changes. I think this was actually from a more recent PTR patch even than this, or maybe we didn't mention it or something. But now also on the live patch, you can see the outlines of your allies through walls, so
Oh
it's
yeah,
kind of
that's a big
cool.
one. Big one.
Even if you're not a support player or something. Um, Ana changes have gone through on console. Brigitte's nerf to her shield bash that now will interact with Doomfist Rocket Punch and Reinhardt's Charge. That's now live. The Earth Shatter rework is now live, which, as far as I can tell, feels really nice. So I'm a fan of that. Notably, the biggest difference from the PTR patch we reported on a couple weeks ago and live now is Roadhog. Um, and the way this started was, I think it was even listed as no, it was not a bug. But previously, Roadhog's alternate fire did not have fall off. Then fairly recently, it was changed on PTR so that he did. And there was sort of an uproar of complaint because that did significantly reduce his DPS and effectiveness against, for example, like Orisa barriers, which was a lot of the reason that often you run a Roadhog was for shield break. Um, but so because of that nerf, he actually got a little bit of a rework, which is again now live. That his primary fire fall off, the range has been increased all the way up to 15 to 30 meters is the fall off range now, which is essentially 150% of what it was. In addition to now the alternate fire having fall off at the same range. So they operate about the same in that regard. Obviously, they still shoot differently. Um, but so it's interesting because one of the perspectives that I've heard is that back when they did the fall off changes for hit scan for Widow and or not Widow, but like McCree and Soldier, and removed fall off from Maze Icicle, the logic there was to make projectile weapons to remove the fall off because of their additional difficulty to hit. Whereas hit scan obviously is much easier to get those hits reliably, and so the fall off damage was supposed to sort of counter that. But notably, Roadhog's both his primary fire and his secondary fire are technically projectiles, but now do operate with fall off, which is interesting. I don't know. I guess that's just how it's going to be. They seem pretty satisfied with that for right now. I imagine they might iterate a little bit more on this new Roadhog for a while, but I personally have yet to see exactly how that'll affect him
Yeah.
overall. But and then the last big thing is Rialto. I think I briefly mentioned a couple weeks ago, a couple shows ago, that Rialto was really statistically a very defender-favored map, particularly the first point. It had something like a 42 or 46% win rate for the attackers. Um, and so, as sort of a buff to the attacker side of that map, Rialto, the payload now travels more quickly and will stop at checkpoints for less time. So, yeah, those are your big live changes now in this most recent patch.
Yeah. Lots of good changes. Not sure what to think about the Roadhog changes, but of course the developers of overall they don't like one shots. And that alternate fire you could the one getting one shot out by the alternate fire did feel very it just didn't feel satisfying when you died to it, and they harp on not I harp on things like that, getting one shot at, and they don't like when things like that happen. So I'm not surprised they did it, but probably not needed because I don't know. It seems like they hate Roadhog overall. It seems like they created Roadhog and then they were like, we hate this character because they created Roadhog and he's like this one shot machine. Basically, he has a hook. He has this gun that can one shot people from very close up, or if you have the right spot on the alternate fire. And like he's basically just one shot the hero, and now they're like, I regret making him.
With a magical wall transporting hook
Yeah,
that they tried to fix for a while.
it seems like they're all everything they've said about how they hate one shots and what they don't like in gameplay. It seems like Roadhog is the like epitome of all of those ideas that they hate. And it's just like, why did they make him then? I love Roadhog. I've been a Roadhog player for a while, but anyway, patch look pretty good. As far as we've got some contenders news, NYXL picking up, of course, XL2 Academy as their contenders team, and main roster both going to take up Nene and Nano Hana, who of course his name used to be Flower, and everyone's has to continually point that out, because
Eventually, he'll build a reputation with his new name.
yeah, well, we'll see if that happens. It's Nano Hana now, guys. But yeah, they pick up both of these contenders players. I don't think either of us are too surprised by this. I think we definitely expected Flower to be up once he was old enough, and Nene's he's a pretty good player. So both good pickups. But I think the biggest news out of this is um, NYXL has a lot of DPS players now. You think one of those are going to get traded?
Let me pull up the list here just to double check. I, uh, yeah, I guess it is important to know, that was a rumor we're talking about. I think you might have said that, but to say it again, it might make a little bit more sense to me, because again, we're looking at NYXL right now, Sibyl being Libero in particular, but also Pine obviously has been playing mostly DBS. Um, but yeah, I wonder if because clearly these are two players that they definitely want to take advantage of. I wonder if something like a move to their double roster, I forget the official name for that, but though to a player status where you can play both on the Overwatch League team and the Contenders team, that would make probably a little bit more sense, I think, for MYXL. Again, unless they have, some plans to the contrary, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you take advantage of the hype behind Pine and how much like how people know and like love Pine at this point, and you trade him for money. You trade him for a big name somewhere else. I mean, or even some talent for their contenders roster, maybe. Honestly, you Pine, in my opinion, Pine, he's a great hit scan player, but he has some of the best plays. Like he's probably got like 3 spots on the top 10 plays from this past season. But is he necessarily like a core piece to the NYXL roster? No, they could be without Pine and they'd be fine, especially adding Nanohana Nene to their roster and already having Sabiel B and like Libero on their team. I mean, I think Pine is probably the perfect trade bait because not only is he like super well known, super hyped up, but they honestly don't. He's not a necessary part to their roster, in my opinion, either.
It's true. Yeah, yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way, but yeah, he's certainly uh, he could be considered underused definitely by that team.
Yeah, I mean, and even I think they used him in some situations that they might have not even needed him to be used in. I think he's a super good hit scan player, but he's hit scan isn't the best at the current time, unless you're playing Widowmaker. Uh, let's go into more rumors. But I'll tell we have on our little rundown here. We have two of the rumors that Mr. King Mykl has rumored, but I probably upwards of 10 rumors and leaks at this point he's tweeted about, and the entire subreddit has turned into our Mykl. He's doing an AMA tomorrow. I mean, or today actually, in a couple hours here, he's doing an AMA. But he is just the king of leaks right now. None of these are official yet, so we're not going to talk about all of them. I wanted to talk about NRG's Rascal. The San Francisco Shock, or that is NRG, is their contenders team. They're moving him up to the main roster. I wanted to talk about this one because it also fuels a different rumor. Rascal's, of course, a DPS player. Shock, another team a lot like NYXL that will have a lot of DPS players with Rascal on their team. Another rumor Mykl's been talking about is trading a huge trade with the Shock happening, and the Shock players being super upset that one of their players are going to be traded. Let's talk about the Shock DPS. Which one do you think they are going to want to trade?
Phew. It's a good question. We're sitting at 5 with Rascal, but even 4 without, of course, Baby Bass, Sinatra, Dante, and Architect. Um, I mean, of those 4, certainly based on sort of the shift in tide of Overwatch League Season 1, obviously we moved away from Baby Bay definitely by the end. These sort of like Shadowburn in that way, that you saw lots of play from the Shocking Stage 1, so Stage 2, that sort of time, but then was played hardly at all by the end of the season. Of those 4, perhaps Baby Bay. Obviously, we know Sinatra's got an absolutely great Tracer. Architect's their Widow player. Dante always putting in work. Junkrat specifically is what I think of, but uh, yeah, probably of those four, probably Baby Bay, I think.
Yeah, and I understand why the Shock are upset that one of their friends are going to be traded, but it seems like even the rumor says that like I think it mentions that they like are threatening to like sort of not want to be on this Shock anymore if they trade this player, and like I don't know. I don't like that aspect. That seems immature to me, and it's like they got to understand that this team is like a business too, and it's not going to be smart for the Shock to keep 5 DPS players. Why would that be smart? And they have to
It's
understand
almost half your roster.
as an organization and as a team overall, the Shock have always had their strong point has always been DPS. Even before turned 18, DPS were their best players, and overall, the Shock players have to understand like they it would be stupid for San Francisco to keep all 5 of these players. As far as everyone thinks Dante is gone, everyone thinks they're going to trade Dante to Houston or somewhere else. But I could see Baby Bay for sure. Another player that they don't necessarily need anymore, and they played a lot less as the season moved on. But both Baby Bay and Dante, I think, are one of those. Both of those, I think they're probably gone. You got to keep Sinatra. He's your guy at this point. Architect's amazing. I think probably your best DPS player. And of course you're bringing Rascal up. I don't think you're bringing Rascal up to trade him. As far as other rumors go, here's another contenders rumor. That the Outlaws are signing Smurf. I wanted to point this one out as well because I think it's super interesting. This could be a reason why Fact Fiction was released because Smurf is a main tank. But when we were talking about Fact Fiction being released, I was talking about how I didn't understand why they picked him up in the first place because Muma is probably one of the best tanks in the league, and you're not going to want to sit Muma because he's your best player. And now they're bringing in Smurf to sit behind Muma, which is interesting again. Have you watched Smurf at all, play at all? He's on the GGEA team, of course.
I'm not very familiar, you know.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar either, but just looking at just seeing he was a main tank, I was like, I guess you have to have a backup, but I don't know. If Muma gets injured or something like that, it makes sense, but and it makes sense to have Smurf instead of Fact Fiction. Fact Fiction is going to cost you a lot more money than Smurf probably will. Overall, I doubt Smurf's going to play that much. Muma's just fantastic, unless there are rumors that Muma might be involved in this big trade as well, which would be very dumb of the Outlaws to do, but we'll see. Can we do it? Can we finally talk about this Overwatch League formatting topic?
Probably.
Probably. We're at 53 minutes right now. We could talk about it for a little bit. Let's do it. Let's talk about it. League formatting, of course, is a big topic. I guess before we get into talking about season 2, let's talk about season 1. Of course, season 1 split up into 4 stages. Each team plays 40 games. There were 2 divisions, Pacific, Atlantic. They were split into 6 teams each in each division. The divisions didn't matter besides if you win the division, then you get the bye week in the final playoffs. There's so much we could dive into. Let's first talk about stages. Split into 4 stages, of course. What overall pros, cons of the stages? What did you think about those?
And so the stages, season 1 made sense because you could sort of define the stage by the way, or by the time you had completed a round robin, right? Because each team had 10 matches per stage. And there were 11 opponents. So with one exception, each team would play every other team for each stage, and that was great. Obviously, that can't happen with 20 teams. Well, I mean, it could, but that same format is much more difficult to try to carry out. There was one of the rumors we talked about a couple weeks ago about changing the stage format, only having like two stages per season, which could take care of that. If each team had say 19 matches per stage, that still keeps the number approximately the same. My issue there would be, of course, it's the same thing it was then, that I think in order to keep to maintain interest in the league, to maintain to those viewing numbers, I think there needs to be enough patch changes, meta changes, map changes, whatever it needs to be to keep that kind of interest there. And if it takes 19 matches, presumably that's 10 weeks between between updates. I think that's going to be a little bit detrimental to the league. I mean, we saw even last year, season one, with 5 week stages, just because of the huge raw number of matches that were played. We saw people getting burnt out. And by the end, well, certainly at the beginning, preseason stage one, I watched 90% or more of the matches that went on. But by the end of the season, I was watching Philadelphia, I was watching some of the, LA Valley in New York, that sort of thing. But just because of the sheer amount of Overwatch, to have 10 weeks of one patch, presumably one meta that evolves, very limited as it goes, I think that would be concerning. Um, I guess I'll let you talk for a while, but that's my initial thing about the stage. Um,
Yeah.
what is it?
To
Yeah.
jump in, there's a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack with stages because originally I don't think there was any thought about patches when it came to stages. It just happened that it was a perfect time to introduce a new patch. I think, according to Nate and Answer, the original thoughts of stages and why stages exist is because they wanted to create a format where they could have, where they would allow teams to travel to specific areas during a stage and sort of spend their time in that area the entire stage. So the fact that there are teams from Korea and teams from China and teams from Europe and teams from America makes it hard, very hard for a city-based league that eventually wants teams to travel places all just randomly, unless you sort of format it in this stage order, because there's going to be a lot of like, if you don't format it in a stage order, and let's say you're the Houston Outlaws, and let's compare two teams, Houston Outlaws and maybe the Dallas Fuel. Let's say the Dallas Fuel have 3 games in a row, and they're all sort of in America. That's not going to be the same thing for Houston if it's sort of random. They could have 1 game in Houston, then have to travel to China the next week, then they have to travel to Europe the next week, and that's just insane and unfair to Houston, who is going in 3 different time zones in 3 different weeks, doesn't really have time to practice because they're traveling all over the place, while the Dallas Fuel maybe just has to travel to California, then come back to Texas. It doesn't make any sense. So what they wanted was to be able to differentiate, sort of make it so, okay, it's stage one. All of the teams from this division are going to be in Asia, and all the teams in this division are going to be in Europe for this entire stage. And then the next stage will come back to America or whatever, which makes a
Yeah.
lot more sense and is a lot more fair. But it just so happens that stages also allowed you to implement a new patch. And it's the big patch debate. And for most people, it isn't a debate. Most people are like you, and I think most people are in the camp of, if they don't switch patches and if they don't keep the game up to date as often as we would like them to, then I'm going to get bored. Some people are like me, and think that patches sort of the patches make competition inconsistent and weird in the fact that, I mean, even if you look at the playoffs, other teams, it just makes it sort of inconsistent. We went into playoffs saying, okay, Valiant, they look really good lately. Same with the Gladiators, and same with NYXL. And then we come into the playoffs, and the patch change makes it so, nope, London and Philadelphia are good. Of course, it's not only the patch change, but it just seems like every stage, everyone is consistently different. And it almost feels like Dallas Fuel. They were a great team on the patch towards the end of the season, but because of how they performed at the beginning of the season, we did not get to see one of the best teams on the current patch play in the playoffs or play at the highest level, which felt kind of weird to me. And I think it's probably just coming from traditional sports where in a sports league, they're not changing how far away like the hoop is in basketball anytime soon. They're not changing rules in the middle of the season that favors like teams who have like, I mean, I think a perfect example is like if NFL changed a rule that made running the ball a lot better, all of a sudden the teams with the best offensive linemen and running backs, they're going to be the best team because they have the better players in that part of the field. And the teams who drafted the best wide receivers are going to be like, well, that's kind of unfair that you just did that in the middle of the season. So coming from a sports perspective, it's kind of weird to me, but I know that you cannot just go the entire season on one patch because everyone's going to be upset based off of the fact that, was it like stage 3 where they didn't put in the Hanzo changes? Was that it?
Yeah, it was stage 3. Yeah, cool, because they put in Brig, but they didn't put in Hanzo.
Yeah. And it was back when Brig was like super overpowered too.
Yeah.
So I know from the fact you just can't do that, from the fact that everyone's reaction was, we're upset that you're doing this. I want them to play on the current patch where I can learn the most from these pros and relate to the gameplay going on. So it's just something. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I think even that most of the players would probably agree with you too. That I think from what we heard last season, that most of the players are also against the patch changes, even as frequently as they are. Just again because of that consistency, it makes practicing a lot easier, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean another argument against what I'm saying is the viewers are going to get bored, obviously, because competition won't evolve, and we'll be seeing the same strategies over and over again all season. Like if we were on the same patch as the first stage, we would just be seeing dive over and over and over again for 4 months, which I do admit would also be boring. So it's just like such a tough situation, and I think the better solution is obviously is the patches, and I think that's more entertaining than, because still in the end it's whatever team can adjust to the patch, whatever team is the best at adjusting, and London was that. And it's whatever team can adjust on the fly, but also just whatever team can run can run dive, can run goats, can run all these different strategies. And I'll give the example of like Team USA was running so many different types of compositions and so many strategies on each map that they just dominated everybody. And that's the team. That's what you look for most in a team, because at any point the game could change, I guess. There's so much to unpack in league formatting and stages. Let's go into season 2 and stages. You mentioned that they're going to split it into 2 stages, but I think so the way you mentioned it was 19 per stage, which would total to 38 games, which is how the British Premier League does it actually. But I believe the rumored number was 28 or 26. I can't remember, 26 games or something. That was the rumored number of games for season 2. That was from
That's even more confusing.
that was from Benchmob. So if it was, I can't remember exactly the number, but if it's 26, then it's like 13 per stage. If it's 28, then it's 14 games per stage. Um, I doubt they would do an odd number because odd numbers are annoying.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as far as two stage, do you like two stages versus four stages? Why do you think they would change to two stages? What do you think? What do you think is behind that thought?
I guess it depends on um, the way they decide, because whatever they do, I think the number of teams that they have is pretty much going to necessitate a rethinking of the way they do their rankings, right?
Yeah.
12 teams, it was super easy because because then everybody plays each other all the time, whatever, and we have ranking that way. But with 20 teams, unless you want to have 8 games a day, 4 days a week for 40 weeks, and I don't know those numbers exactly, but some ridiculous amount of Overwatch, that you're not going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
And so I think one idea I had actually was that if they decided to go with some type of pool play, and maybe divide, kind of like the Overwatch World Cup, kind of not, but maybe divide them up into say 4 groups of 5 teams, and do pools, um, try to divide stuff up that way. Maybe make remake some pools every 4 matches based on results, that sort of thing. Some kind of modified, I don't know the names of tournament structures, but some kind of modified, ladder climbing thing. Um, and make that your stage format. It would be really complicated, but that would allow in that way you could put in a patch after every, or a stage break, or however you wanted to think about it, after every set of and you wouldn't do this, but you'd have the ability to make a stage break or a patch break or something after every set of 4 or 5 matches, right? After each round of pool play is completed. And whether they did that based on Atlantic Pacific divisions, whether they tried to add more divisions, I don't know. I guess they probably wouldn't do that if they wanted to keep an All Stars format. But yes, some type of thing like that. I think the basic structure has definitely got to change if they want to avoid just a glut of games. Because again, that also I think is going to hurt viewership overall.
Oh yeah, and I think overall their decision to go with not what you're saying, 38 games, is just the amount of games they would have to put in. I know, like I was saying, the Premier League, which is the European British Soccer League, has 38 games per team, but that is spread out 9 months throughout the year. They only have a 2.5 month break, like the summer. So they play 38 games, but it is throughout 9 months. It's like once a week, sometimes twice a week. So it's super spread. Overwatch League would have to spread their schedule out if they had that many games with this many teams now. But what I predict to do, based off the fact that they're borrowing most of their ideas and format ideas from traditional sports, besides the stages and all this other stuff they're doing. I think, like they said, they're doing two stages, but I honestly think they keep it pretty similar to how they did it last season. I think the biggest thing is, like you're saying, do they do 4 divisions, or do they stick to like 10 divisions of 2, or 2 divisions of 10? I mean, 10 divisions of 2.
That would be something.
Wow. And I think someone plotted it out on the Reddit this past week, if they did 4 divisions, what it would look like. And if they're doing it based off of location, the Atlantic like East Division or something, whatever it would be called, would be stacked with basically like the 4 best teams from last season. Like Philadelphia, Boston, New
New
York,
York and London.
London were all in the same division.
Yeah.
So if you only played the teams in your own division, that would be kind of unfair, because because of that, one division would be lacking talent and one division would be full of talent, but I do assume that we're still going to have two conferences, Atlantic and Pacific. Whether or not they split those into two divisions, I'm not sure. And I assume that you're going to be playing more games against teams in your conference than the other conference based off of what they want to do eventually, which is travel to each location. So they want the teams that are closer to each other to play each other more often. Um, and then I honestly don't know. I think another big thing. I think this conversation on this podcast. We could talk more about tons of other formatting stuff, but this will mainly be talking about stages. I think we should finish it off talking about stage playoffs with more teams and the fact that last year you didn't play every other team in a stage. You always missed one, right? You always missed one other team.
Yeah.
With these stages, you're going to miss a lot of other teams, especially if it's 26 or 28. You're going to miss either five or a lot more teams, either five or six more teams. And stage playoffs might get a little bit more unfair because of it. What did you think of stage playoffs and the stage championship last year for each stages? Did you buy into that format? Did you buy into to the hype of the stage championships?
I think again for the format they had last year, I think so. Generally, that it made sense to have the stage playoffs, like you said. Obviously, they couldn't have predicted necessarily, but for teams like Dallas Fuel, right, that had a really amazing stage four. Um, Although I guess were they even in stage four playoffs?
Yeah, Dallas Fuel was in stage four playoffs. They
They
lost to
were okay.
New York XL in the semifinal.
Okay. But yeah, so for cases like that, I think that's great. That's definitely what they need. Yeah, as far as trying to come up with, um, for a larger division, or for a larger league going up to 20 teams, um, uh, I don't know what kind of precedent there is for this, but I think it would probably, again, without requiring a 19 game round robin every time, it would probably require some kind of fancy math um, that again would complicate things for the average viewer. But in order to get some kind of strength of schedule um, qualifier, some kind of whatever, whether it's like uh, a ladder type play or not, but um, uh, in order to be able to compare teams that way, I think that is going to be important. Um, again, without going with a full round robin, which it sounds like is not the goal necessarily.
Yeah. As far as stage playoffs and championships go from this past year with the four stages, I was by at the first one I was excited, but as they went on, I was like, okay, what's the point of these really? And I didn't like. I don't know. While it's kind of that effect of like, okay, London's like the first stage champion. That's pretty cool. And then as it went on, the stage champions like started to fill up more, and it didn't feel as special. It was like, okay, like they didn't even all they do is win money, and like this doesn't matter towards the playoffs at the end of the season. And maybe it even like murked up, like it kind of made it murky for us fans. Like, okay, how much do the playoffs just another stage playoffs? And like it kind of, in my opinion, might have made the actual playoffs a little bit worse than they could have been, and a little less hype than they could have been. But with two stages, I like the idea of stage playoffs. With only two stage playoffs happening, maybe, or maybe even just having one playoffs after stage one and then having an actual playoffs after stage two, instead of having stage two playoffs and then the actual playoffs, because I think that was probably the most confusing part for me was stage four playoffs, and then they had to take like a month break and then actual playoffs.
Yeah, that part was weird.
Yeah,
They could work on some timing, but
definitely can work on some timing. But as far as like, I don't know if they'll, since it's not a round robin, the NFL isn't a round robin either. You play only 16 games and there are 32 teams, and they still just, they don't care. They put whoever has the best records in the playoffs. Doesn't matter if one team had a pretty terrible strength of schedule; they earned it because they have one of the best records in the league. And to be fair, only 12 of the 32 teams make the playoffs. So even if you do have a really easy strength of schedule, it's going to be pretty hard to make the top 12 regardless. You're going to have to be a pretty good team to make that top 12 out of 32. So overall, as the league grows and you can't have round robin type things, I think they will have stage playoffs once again. Will it still be 4, or will they make it 6 or 8 now that they're 20 teams? I don't know. But I think they'll just make it simple. They'll just do best records still, and maybe make it a little more. Try to add something that adds hype to it. Maybe bring a trophy in or something like that, and give it a little more hype, but maybe not too much hype. You still want your most hype thing to be the championship. There's no doubt about that.
Definitely.
But overall, I feel like we're talking so abstractly. We have like no physical evidence of any of this happening at this point. But yeah, overall, there's going to be changes next year, and I can't wait till they get released so we can talk more about it. But these predictions and speculations are pretty nice. We're pretty deep into the podcast. I think there's a lot more formatting things we could talk about. So add that to the rundown once again next week, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about something else. And do we could briefly mention this dev update that's coming soon. Hopefully we'll talk more about it once it comes out and on the next episode, but there are possible Pharah changes coming out. Everyone's kind of confused as to why. And maybe the social features that were rumored. We don't really have any clue what Jeff Kaplan's going to be on camera talking about this time, but
Because we were talking earlier, you said, we just got a new map. We just fairly recently got a new hero. We're not expecting one until BlizzCon at least. We just recently had the Diva event. We just recently got the Diva short, animated short. It's who knows what's coming up.
yeah, I mean, whether it's most of the developer updates are either patch changes or they're talking about events, or talking about new maps or new heroes, and we've knocked out so many of those recently, and we know the new hero's not coming till BlizzCon, and it's like, okay, what could this possibly be? But we'll see. That's episode 5. Let's close with some social media handles. Twitter, you can follow me personally, JWGeorgeIV. You can follow Joe, Kirkpatrick_Inc. INC. You can follow this show on Twitter, On The Flank Show. You can email us, of course, if you want us to talk about certain topics. ontheflankshow@gmail.com. Send us an email. Of course, you found this podcast some way, but if you want to find it in a different way or listen to it on a different platform, we are ontheflank.podbean.com. We're on YouTube. My channel name is John George. iTunes, of course, we post the link on Twitter all the time. You can subscribe, and now we are going to be on Spotify. So yeah, we're reaching out.
Broader audience. It's gonna be great.
Broader audience. We're about to blow up. Yeah, thank you guys for listening, and check you guys next week.